some of this sort of organizing. There's definitely more access, much more access to media in the 60s and 70s, much more access to media in urban areas in terms of newspapers and radio, etc. Yeah.
In a lot of colonial governments, rural structures, administrative structures are left in place. So that chief kind of system, became such a became a way to control.
So there's this issue that what's called customary rule was very much left in place, and this is true in most sub-Saharan African countries, but not all. So the sort of role of traditional chiefs in the countryside, this is very much the case in Sierra Leone, many parts of West Africa, not so in Tanzania where the chiefs were abolished right after independence, but in many places there was customary rule, which is thought of as being, even in the post-independence period, as being somewhat repressive. And maybe that sort of somewhat repressive customary rule helped to hold down political expression, whereas in cities it was impossible to have that sort of rule because of the nature of cities, their density, and these structures weren't in place. And so I'm sure some of you are familiar with the writing of Mamdani. So Mahmoud Mamdani has a book, I think it's maybe 96, called Citizen and Subject. How many people have heard of this book or read it? Like a couple people. You have, perfect, you made that's your point. Great. Citizen and Subject, and then colon the whatever. But the point of that book is to say, in African colonial regimes, there were two legal systems set up, there were two governing systems set up, one in rural areas and one in cities. And the one in rural areas tended to be repressive and, quote, traditional or customary, even when the Europeans had to sort of invent the traditions, but invent them in a way that very much empowered, so these were the subjects in rural areas, empowered chiefs to basically hold down demands for popular political participation, whereas people in cities became citizens and had a lot more rights and were able to take part in local elections and other things. So there was this dichotomy put in place that was extremely strong in certain settings. And so I think you have your finger on something important there. Was there another comment? Okay, had you read Mamdani too, or not yet? Okay, yeah. Yeah. I see. Uh-huh. Yeah, so maybe, and maybe this is related to access to media, maybe it's related to education or income, maybe it's related to the nature of the political regime, but for whatever reason, we might just think there's more pro-democracy organizing and views and strongly held attitudes in cities in the 1960s in sub-Saharan Africa. And probably education could be part of that, could be playing a role in that. But okay, any other thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, huge, and that's something that continues today, where African countries are urbanizing very rapidly. There tend to be a lot more jobs in urban areas, a lot more possibilities. So you have, huge amounts of migration. So if you remember back even to the sample of kids in the deworming study that we talked about a couple months ago now, and then the long-term follow-up, I discussed some of the results from a 10-year follow-up. Now we've just been doing like a 13 or 14-year follow-up, and something like 40-something% of the sample have lived in a city by 14 years later. It's almost half the sample. That doesn't mean they permanently move, but they've spent at least 3 or 4 months living in a city. So there's a lot of urban, sort of mobility towards urban areas. Say that again? They just feel like that's the growth sector, that's what they're going to focus on those policies because those are the policies of the future. I think so, and I think that's the sort of ideological rationale, say, for subsidizing industrialization and all those kinds of policies is to say, like, this is the direction we want to go, this is the direction we're going, we're urbanizing, we're becoming industrial, we're industrializing. So there's a comment in the back.
So how do you get your survival culture?
Do you have any thoughts?
Well, Sierra Leone lost 82% of their revenue by the research policies, so they could have given more to the urban and rural areas probably.
Yeah, it really feels like in some of the extreme cases, it was self-defeating. And I think there's 2 points there. There is a one explanation is, look, it's the post-independence period, governments are trying lots of policies, and then sometimes they went too far, and they ended up on the wrong side of the Laffer curve. That's one explanation. And maybe that's what happened in Sierra Leone. They kept squeezing and getting little bits more revenue, and at some point everything collapsed. Then there's another explanation. I think Bates would probably want us to think about that explanation, which is, no, maybe even the collapse was deliberate. And that kind of goes beyond the argument in his book. He doesn't go that far because things hadn't gotten quite that bad by the late 70s when he's writing his book. But in the 80s, it does get that bad, and we have this massive increase in civil wars in Africa, like things just collapse. And can anybody think of, why would you want to get to the point where like everything collapsed? Could there ever be a rationale for an 82% drop in revenue? Or is that just, yeah? Yeah, it could be something to do with just feeling like your time horizons are short. I will give one example. I don't have an answer for this, but this has been a constant topic of discussion in the political economy of development for decades now. People trying to understand if there was some rationale. And there is this famous case. I don't think I've told you guys this story, but in the months leading up to the Rwandan genocide, the president of Rwanda, Juvenal Habyarimana, actually was an old friend of Mobutu Sese Seko, the leader of Zaire at the time, Democratic Republic of Congo now. And they would write each other letters. And some of these letters came out and became public later, and apparently it's legitimate. And the president of Rwanda was sort of complaining to Mobutu, saying, look, I'm trying to control this rebellion, which eventually won the war, and the remnants of that regime are still in power in Rwanda today, Kagame's regime. And Mobutu writes back to him and says, you made a mistake from the start. You never should have built any roads, you never should have built anything. Because now they're coming down your roads that you built to get you. So the idea is if you enrich your population at all, you give them schooling, you build roads, you do anything, you're empowering them against you. So there may be an extreme strategy which gets to this point maybe, which is if everybody is just totally in disarray, there's no public investment. Maybe this was Shaka Stevens' strategy too. You can't export your crops. I'm going to let the railroad go down. I'm not going to invest in power. I'm not going to invest in school. Everybody is just totally disempowered. I may be able to stay in power for a while by playing off these little groups of disorganized, uneducated, unhealthy people long enough to enrich myself a little longer. So that might be the explanation. And in the case of, say, Zaire, that seemed to have been Mobutu's deliberate strategy because he never did any public investment in 30-something years. Of course, he never did any of it with the full blessing of the U.S., which was giving him billions of dollars in aid, and was very happy that he was, quote, anti-communist. I'm not sure exactly what he was, but anyway, any other comments or thoughts? That was depressing. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to come to that with Easterly. I mean, Easterly kind of makes this point, which is like, if things aren't going well, I get more aid from the international community. Why in the world would I have things succeed? Roxanne?
It's in the interest of the African leaders to not empower the urban population. Why is it, like, for example, coming from the community, they gave special scholarships to certain students to be able to go to elite school? How does that relate to the idea that, like, the increased education might be from, like, private all of this? Like, does that
you're thinking that educating, you're saying if certain favored people are educated, they would become leaders of the sort of opposition in the future? Yeah, I mean, maybe regimes do that. I think there's a couple points to make, which is one, it's very easy, especially in authoritarian regimes, to always point everything towards the leader and imagine that they have their hand on all the levers of power, whereas in reality there are still factional battles even within autocratic regimes, and they can't control everything. So there might have just been a good Ministry of Education bureaucrat that managed to raise funds for a good program, and so it was below the radar screen of the leader, they didn't care or something. That's one thing. The other thing is there are sometimes investments made that attempt to bolster future supporters, and so they might have thought of this as not sort of leading to instability, but sort of bolstering the regime. I mean, the British, in the British colonial period, they were famous, this is throughout colonial, colonial Africa, both in West Africa and in East Africa, for educating, the sons of elite chiefs, who were, these elite chiefs were effectively collaborators with the British. They were the people, Mamdani writes about as the new authorities in rural areas that were basically taking their orders from the European colonizers. So if we educate their sons, they're going to kind of be the next generation of repressive local leaders that can consolidate our power, something like that. Okay, still bleak. Let's try to be a little bit more. So what ended up happening? I want to walk through this because this is really what sets the stage for base. If you have punitively high rates of taxation to the levels we saw in some countries, eventually you're going to get falling production, because if you aren't paid to do something, you're not going to do it. You're going to get smuggling, and both of those are going to contribute to falling government revenues. And as was just alluded to, the Sierra Leone case is like the most extreme version of this you can imagine, where basically you just stop collecting revenue because no one's producing anymore, or at least not selling it to the marketing board. So that is one very bad consequence. As a result, African governments in the late 70s and early 80s start developing massive chronic budget deficits. So basically, they put in place education and health programs and infrastructure programs, but now one of the main sources of revenue to fund those programs in agriculture isn't bringing in much revenue anymore because of the punitive rates of taxation of agricultural production. So you have budget deficits. Countries are making up those budget deficits in the short run with increasing foreign borrowing. So in the late 70s and early 80s, you have a huge spike in foreign debt held by African countries. And going back to the point before about how these generalized other regions, you see a similar pattern in Latin America. You see massively, rapidly increasing foreign debt in the late 70s and early 80s that led to the debt crisis of the early to mid 80s. And that debt crisis hit Latin America and Africa equally. The other sort of macroeconomic consequence of these chronic budget deficits is high inflation. So governments that are unable to pay for everything they promised start printing money effectively to pay for them, and that leads to inflation. So within a few years, if you look from the mid-70s to the early 80s, you see this very rapid deterioration in macro conditions and public finance conditions in many African countries. It wasn't just a few, it was very widespread, and this has very severe consequences for growth. It's very destabilizing. On top of that, we already talked about this notion of bloated state bureaucracy in the agricultural sector. There was also a lot of subsidization in industry, some of which wasn't that sort of well planned. There was an idea that, now that we have the revenue, we're going to invest in industry rapidly. We're going to rapidly industrialize. Everybody wanted to rapidly industrialize for a very good reason. Why wouldn't you have? African governments knew that European colonizers had sort of suppressed local development. They were extracting all these resources to Europe. They said, instead of all those resources going from African agriculture back to Europe to fund European industry, let it fund African industry. So it was an attempt to do very rapid industrialization, but as a result, a lot of mediocre projects were funded, let's say. And at the same time, there were lots of controls on trade, and so agricultural policy is only one part of that. But if you do want to put in place, if you do want to fund industry, let's say we now start producing shoes in Ghana. So the government subsidizes a shoe factory in Ghana. The last thing you want is competition from foreign producers. So very often, squeezing agriculture went along with large subsidies for new industries, went along with very high tariff rates. All of these have a logic. There's a logic, and there's a way that they all fit together, these policies. Because your policy in one sector sort of fits together with the other sector. But taken together, the macroeconomic consequences were quite severe. It cut Africa off from trade in many ways, and was basically subsidizing projects that weren't very well thought out. Okay, let me pause. Can people think of any other natural consequences of these policies? Okay, so what ends up happening? And this is really kind of the transition to the next set of topics. I just wanted to go through the Bates case because it really highlights the kind of pathologies, or the sort of policy pathologies. The idea in the early 1980s that really took root in the international financial institutions that had been lending a lot of money to African governments during the late 70s and early 80s as a result of part of these policies. The idea that took root was that these bad policies, well, I think first of all, there wasn't a very good understanding of where these policies came from. That's why Bates' book was so influential. I think international policymakers didn't quite get, the sort of extreme version of the agricultural policies they saw. But beyond that, there was a feeling that they had to stop this lending money, because by lending money to governments that were pursuing these policies, they were just going to keep underwriting policies that were leading to basically negative growth. It's not a coincidence, it's around this time that growth in sub-Saharan Africa as a whole turns negative. Again, really in the mid-70s to late 70s. So growth is tailing off, there's huge deficits, tons of macro instability, and this idea took root that the spigot is going to close, no more lending until there's policy reform. And the kind of package of reforms that they advocated became popularly known, I think it was known internally to those institutions for a brief period, and then they kind of rebranded them, but known as structural adjustment, or structural adjustment policies or programs, SAPs. And the idea was, look, we'll keep lending you money, Ghana, or Congo, or Cameroon, if you stop squeezing agriculture, stop subsidizing industry, doing all these things that are just leading to chronic budget deficits, inflation, etc. We're not just going to keep throwing good money after bad. And this is really the focus of Easterly. So Easterly's in a very interesting position to write about this because he was actually working in the World Bank in the early 80s, and actually was working in Ghana. He had just finished his PhD in 82. He worked for the World Bank for about 20 years until he was basically kicked out after he wrote this book, and then ended up at NYU. And so his first sort of foreign mission, or foreign policy mission, was in Ghana in 83 or something like 82 or 83, right around the time that the bank was trying to push structural adjustment programs on Ghana. So it's a kind of interesting perspective. He's very skeptical of these programs, as you'll see when you read it, but he was sort of helping to implement them as well. Okay, so we have time for another clicker question, just in time. And I'm asking this question because I want to get people's views before we discuss these policies, to get kind of people's ex-ante views. So do you think that structural adjustment policies in sub-Saharan Africa, overall, taking everything together, have contributed to slower economic growth? A, did not have much of an effect on growth. B, are a big reason why Africa's growth has turned around very strongly since 2000. C, D, you just can't generalize because the programs are different, the countries are different. That's always going to be the right answer here, but the other ones, you may feel on net, maybe there's something else. And then E, it's too soon to tell. Is the sort of the implication still unclear? So I'll see if you guys want to click in on that. Now everybody's just doing D. Come on, guys, just go out there and get yourself, put yourself out there. Okay, somebody switched out of D. Good. I can see them when they come in. Okay, so just another 5 seconds. Okay, so the distribution is pretty interesting. A lot of Ds, which is totally sensible because the whole exercise of this semester and generalizing the whole continent is a very perilous activity. But we're actually quite a bit of spread across A, B, and C. So we have a fair number of people saying it was negative, 0, or positive. So that's actually kind of good to know because I think there's a lot to think about. So what was the big change? So what ended up happening in the 80s is all of a sudden the World Bank and the IMF started funding multiple structural adjustment loans, which they wouldn't do typically before. There wouldn't be as much conditionality before as they started doing in the 80s. And on average, each African country got 6 such loans in the 80s, each Latin American country got 5 such loans, and each Asian country on average got 4 such loans. So it's sort of like every other year or so, there was one of these big loans going out with very specific conditionality on the loan. And, of course, the big question is how effective they were. And this is a very interesting area, and one where debate is incredibly polarized. And this is why I think Easterly is interesting to read. It's important you think about it for yourself and form your own view. On the one hand, you can take the view that, A, the international financial institutions, like any lender, can impose any condition they want. It's the money of the international community. They don't owe the money to anybody. If you're going to pursue what they deem disastrous policies, why would they give you money? There's some sort of basic logic to that. At the same time, there's these other two views. So there's the one view which is sort of like, well, we shouldn't care that they're just bankers that come up with what they want to do. At the same time, we can't get around politics, and this is sort of the theme of today's lecture and probably last time's lecture, which is we can't understand foreign aid if we don't think about politics all the time. And then there are these two politically driven, polar opposite views. So the first view is, yes, there was a lot of subsidies going to maybe the wrong industrial sectors, but these agricultural marketing boards were an important tool for extending credit to farmers. They were an important vehicle for mobilizing revenue for the government, and that revenue went to benefit the countries in so many different ways. So by trying to shut down the marketing boards, you're basically cutting off the source of revenue from the government. So in other words, don't abolish boards, find out ways to make them work better. But it turned out that in the structural adjustment programs, there was often a push just to abolish them. And we'll talk about a couple country cases of that probably next time. So that's one view, and that basically this was some ideologically driven attempt to get the state out of the economy, promote a radical free market ideology, and in the process of doing that, weakening the state's capacity to do all kinds of good things. That is the sort of left of center critique of structural adjustment programs. That it was sort of Reagan and Thatcher driven policies to cripple the state in poor countries. And I'm sure everybody's heard these sorts of arguments or read them or gone to protests. I went to plenty of protests when I was an undergrad making those claims. And second, and this is a kind of interesting point, there's a counterpoint which says, what? All these conditions were actually just for show. At the end of the day, the fact that every African country still got 6 loans, even though it maybe took them 20 years to reform the marketing board, meant the conditionality was actually never enforced. The money just kept flowing. The only thing that changed was politically, again back to politics, in rich countries, people were no longer willing to just keep throwing money at countries without at least some justification, public policy justification, that the loans were pushing reform. So at the end of the day, the money kept flowing, the bank had no incentive to cut off the money, but they basically made countries write these agreements saying, I promise to reform X, Y, and Z, but the countries never did it. And so we'll come back to this dichotomy next time and try to figure out which of these caricatures is closer to reality, and there are some country differences we'll talk about.